state. From the financial and entertainment epicenter of New York City to the sleeping and empty small cities and towns of upstate, which once bustled with manufacturing, mining, and farming. We all know from inspiration, history, and nature, we deserve a return to the success and growth of generations past, a birthright being squandered by corruption in Albany, and the depredations of an insecure, scheming mountebank posing as governor, who loathes both us and himself. As liberty beckoned to enslaved peoples behind the Iron Curtain via American broadcasts after World War II, we now say, believe, rise, and join us. Welcome to Radio Free New York. Andrew Hollister is away. He is on a family trip, and in his stead we have Kevin Wilson, Libertarian Today.
Howdy, y'all. I'm Kevin, in for Andrew. He's going to be out for like a week or so I'll be in talking all things liberty here on Radio Free New York. Thanks for joining us today. No matter where you're listening, we are live here in the WYSL studio, and we would love for you to call in today, 585-346-3000, and then we will be rebroadcasting on WACK and I got this. ENY?
What city is it in? What city?
It's in Elmira.
Elmira, and so Elmira, New York would be W-E-N.
Why? Yeah, that's what I said. I said W-E-N-Y.
Oh, I thought you said D-N-Y.
Right? Like W-E-N-Y. So, I had a brain fart just a second ago, but I apologize. W-E-N-Y, okay. We love you down there.
The Patriot.
The Patriot, yes. So thank you for listening. And of course, if you want to give us feedback on this show, you can send us an email at contact@radiofreenewyork.com. And of course, you can always send us a message on Facebook, either the Radio Free New York page or the Andrew C. Hollister page. I have the comments open right now, so we will be talking criminal justice reform. Again, part 2 of that. We talked a bit about bail reform last week, and this week I wanted to talk about another part of that that bill package that was getting a little bit of attention, but I think it's kind of fallen to the wayside in some of the media relative to the bail reform stuff. But I want to talk about like the defense discovery reform stuff. And before I get too deep into this conversation, I do want to preface with, I'm not a lawyer. I haven't gone to law school. I don't have any legal training or anything. I'm just an average guy trying to figure out how this law impacts everyday New Yorkers, just like most of the rest of you, right? We want to know, are the people in Albany doing the right thing to both keep New Yorkers safe and to protect our individual rights and liberties? And most of the time, I think they get it wrong.
Yeah.
90% of the time, I think they get it wrong.
The answer to those two questions is no and noer.
Yeah. But I will say, as I kind of indicated last week, I am mostly a fan of the criminal justice reform package. I think that bail reform is on net a good thing, even if there are some hiccups and worries with bail reform. And I think the defense discovery stuff is really good, too. I think that there's a lot of misinformation about this side of it as well. But it's meant to fix a serious problem within New York State's criminal justice system specifically. And I'm going to be referencing a couple different articles that I'll be posting in the comments that you'll see on the news feeds, and you'll see also on our podcast notes as well. And of course, you can go to any podcast service. We are out there everywhere on Apple Podcast. You go to WYSL1040.com, download the podcast there, or any podcasting service. We are out there. Find us, subscribe to us, listen to us, tell us what you think. So I just posted 2 articles in there if you want to read along with what I'm reading along in. And now I'm going to reference one article from the Marshall Project that actually came out a couple years ago that kind of outlines why there's a need for discovery reform and why some of these bills started to happen. And it's been a process long in the making. So I'm going to read the introduction, though. In September 2013, a fight broke out on the sidewalk outside the Bronx nightclub where Aaron Cedres worked as a bouncer. It was a confusing scrum of about a dozen people, and one man suffered a broken jaw and deep slashes to his head and back. A month later, Cedres, then a 25-year-old father with no criminal record, was charged with gang assault, which carried the prospect of 25 years in prison. Cameras had been posted outside the club, and the prosecutor said the tapes looked bad for Cedres, his lawyer recalled. Cedres was offered a plea deal, 5 years behind bars. He insisted that he had thrown one punch to help break up two men, and he urged his lawyer to get the footage. Cedros was up against entrenched legal practices. New York is one of 10 states where prosecutors could wait until just before trial to turn over witness names and statements and other evidence known as discovery, which backs up criminal charges. It's a strategic advantage that critics call unfair and unnecessary.
It's extremely unfair.
So some discovery, such as video footage, is supposed to be turned over on request, but defense attorneys complain that the requests are often countered, delayed, or ignored, and that the restricted discovery rules put people like Cedros in a high-stakes dilemma. Plead guilty without seeing all the evidence, or risk a trial that could end in a prison sentence much longer than what they might get under a plea. So it's cases like that happen all the time, and I'm sure are still happening in New York State, even with some of the discovery reform stuff. And Bob, you had mentioned that it's unfair. You've seen this before.
Oh yeah, it's the prosecutors hold all the cards pretty much.
Yeah.
And because they have the inside track, and they are it's a well-established legal principle that they have to share that with the other side. But in practice, that's not usually, it's honored in the breach. It sort of happens, but they still maintain a margin of superiority in terms of access to information. And that's, that timing issue is really critical too, that you mentioned on that piece you just read, where they don't divulge the information to the defense until the last possible moment. So it makes it very difficult to, before a trier of fact, to really make a convincing case, because you haven't had time to formulate it.
Right. So there could be evidence that the prosecution has gathered that's going to be used against you in a trial, and you don't know about it until right before the trial. Or there could be evidence that they've gathered that proves your innocence as well, and you don't necessarily have that information in front of you, even though they're supposed to turn that over in a timely fashion. Often that didn't happen, and there's little recourse for you if that's what was going on. So in this case, they're trying to get access to this video that kind of showed what happened in this fight, but they didn't have that information of, does this video show that this guy had participated in this fight, or does it show that he didn't participate in this fight? And then not knowing that, how can you make a good decision on whether or not you should plead to 5 years in jail, which is a long time, or again, risk going to trial, and maybe the evidence against you is really good, and you might be looking at 25 years.
Right.
The rest of your life, he'd be 50 by the time he gets out.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's things like that where you get so many people who come up against the system. They don't understand what's happening. And I've seen it happen I've seen stories on Facebook. I've seen friends and family. Sometimes they get in tricky situations where they're like, well, I don't know how this system works, and suddenly all this stuff's being thrown at me, and they're telling me I need to take a plea deal, and maybe you're looking at just a small punishment, but you have a record, or you're looking at something more serious where, I could spend 10 years in jail if I don't take this plea deal to take 6 months probation and whatever else.
Another factor too that enters into all this, lots of times these defendants are indigent, and so they have court-appointed counsel, they have public defenders, right. And this is no knock on public defenders and on the folks who do that for a living. They're many of them are very good, they're very qualified, but in many cases they're extremely overworked, and there's just a limited amount of time they can devote to any one case.
Yeah, and a lot of times, like the easiest course of action is to just kind of take a plea deal. And for a lot of them, it's all right, well, they don't know or have the time to dedicate like hours or days to figuring out how can I build the best case for my client. The easiest thing is, all right, well, you could just take this plea deal and that's probably good. But then even when you do that, even when the plea deal's not that bad, then you end up with a criminal record. And if something else happens later on, suddenly that's taken into account where you're being charged with something else. Like, oh, well, they have a record of something else. So people, including judges and juries, are going to be more likely to assume that person's guilty of a crime, even if they aren't, because they pled guilty to a previous crime. And it's stuff like that kind of built the need for discovery reform in New York State, something that had already happened in other states like North Carolina and Texas. New York State's pretty far behind on a lot of this stuff, and that changed recently because of the laws, the bail reform package and the discovery reform package that we've been talking about for a while, and it's making a lot of headlines lately. But when we come back, we'll talk about what some of the concerns are with New York State's specific discovery reform packages and why some people are worried that it may endanger lives of witnesses. Let's talk about that here on Radio Free New York in just a few minutes.
Your business relies on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at SimpleTech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are, SimpleTech Innovations should be your first call. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. SimpleTech Innovations.
Hi, Bob Savage here for the WYSL station. So times are tight, and you've got to watch every penny. How to get maximum advertising impact without shelling out maximum bucks? Well, there's print media. Of course, there's a reason why it's called the incredible shrinking daily paper. Then there are those penny savers and shoppers, 98% of which hit the recycling bin without ever being opened. And are you really looking for customers who are shopping for used tires and playpens? You could try cable TV, 500 channels, 12 viewers per channel. Or how about hiring some guy in a day-glow orange wig to dance holding up your sign down at the corner? If you want real advertising impact with a quality message for savvy consumers who actually have money to spend, WYSL has a giant 20,000-watt signal and 2 FM channels at 92.1 and 95.5, covering 1.4 million people all over Rochester and the region, literally all the way to Pennsylvania. Get results, save time and money. Call us, get on board, and start growing for 2020. 346-3000 or WYSL1040.com.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to SimpleTech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that SimpleTech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at SimpleTech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at SimpleTech Innovations a call today.
Coming back
At 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. SimpleTech Innovations.
You're listening to Radio Free New York.
And we are back in today's Radio Free New York with Kevin Wilson in for Andrew.
Hello, welcome back, everyone, and thanks everyone for watching and listening in. Hello, Nathan. I see you commented. Thank you for the comment. And again, please send your comments this way, or if you want to participate in the discussion, we're live noon to 1 today at 585-346-3000. Call in and let us know what you think. Okay, so one of the things I've heard around this discovery reform stuff is that one of the parts of discovery reform is that it leaves witnesses more vulnerable to attack or intimidation because it requires the prosecutors to kind of turn over that information in a timely manner. And it says, I'm reading from the courtinnovation.org paper that I thought was pretty good on this. It says the names and adequate contact information for any person who has relevant information regarding the case. So that means that if there's a witness, that they're supposed to turn that stuff over right away. And again, part of this is most of this is changing the timeliness of turning over materials, but part of that is also like you need to disclose that information in a way that makes sense so that the defense can either prepare a defense and explain what the witness is going to say or conduct further interviews, things like that. And I know some of the other parts of it is that they're supposed to keep the kind of scene of the crime also intact for as long as possible. And so a lot of people have said, okay, well, what this does is this opens up someone who, say, had their house broken into, and maybe they're assaulted in their home, maybe they're injured in their home by someone who broke into their house. How long are they supposed to keep that scene in place? And then the other part of it that I've heard is that the defense is supposed to be able to go in and check out the place and be able to gather their own evidence. And a lot of people are concerned about that, and rightly so. I get it. You know, if you're experienced a traumatic situation and you're told, okay, the defense is able to go over here and look at your home and come into your place, that feels very violating. And I understand why people would feel that way.
Well, sure, yeah. I mean, in burglary cases, just imagine how this would play out. So if somebody breaks and enters into your house, and maybe they assault you while they're in there. Now, this person will be ROR'd. They'll be, released with, well, not ROR'd, but yeah, ROR'd because they'd...
in some cases.
In some cases, yeah, because no cash bail will be necessary. So now this person knows your identity, obviously, and is free out walking the street, and furthermore can really... practically speaking, violate you by coming in with the attorney to, research the condition of the premises to create a record for the defense. So it's kind of another violation of your privacy, and it kind of, extends the impact of that crime.
Yeah, and so. What this says is and I'm reading from this document again, it says, defendant may request a court order permitting access to a crime scene or other premises related to the case. The court can also order that the premises remain unchanged. In considering whether to grant such a motion, the court must consider several factors. Need for access, including the risk that the defendant will be deprived of useful evidence, the position of the individual or entity who owns or possesses the premises, the privacy interest and perceived hardship to the individual or entity allowing access, and the position of the prosecution regarding the request for access.
What does that mean, position of the prosecution? What?
I guess whether or not they need it, or whether or not the prosecution requests that. That's what I assume. Again, I don't totally.
It's extremely broad language. I mean, I think this is one of the major factors that's a problem here. Is these requirements are so broad, and so litigable.
Yeah, and you look at some of these things, right? Like, again, I'm not someone who's a lawyer. I'm looking at this stuff and like, what does that mean exactly? I don't exactly know what that means. And when people don't know, they'll fill in the gaps with often the worst case scenario, right?
Well, yeah, you know what? I mean. Pardon the cynicism here, but I think it's appropriate at this point. All the vagueness and broadness in the language in this provision basically is a gift to attorneys, which is a major constituency of the Cuomo regime.
They get to spend more time and money hashing it out.
Exactly. It's a great big wet kiss to the defense bar.
I mean, that's so cynical, but I do read a lot of these laws and I'm like, man, that's just food for lawyers. That's just something that's going to end up costing a ton of money to both the state and to, private litigators. And I'm like, why is it written in that way? Why not make it as clear as possible instead of doing something that's going to be a fight? And it's going to be an expensive fight. So, again, if you don't have money in some of these things, like you end up on the losing end of that.
Let me introduce you to the SAFE Act, another garden of litigation.
Yeah, no, that's a mess. And it not only does it take away our rights, it's vague enough in enough places that it leaves open a lot of discretion on the account of law enforcement, and that makes people unsure. And I don't think that's a good environment to be in. Now I will say, like, this thing ends with the court may deny access if the prohibitive value can be obtained through other means. Further, if access is granted, the individual or entity who possesses or owns the property may request that law enforcement be present while granting access. And again, this isn't necessarily access to the person who is accused of the crime. It's access to the defense. So judge may say, like, okay, only the attorney can go, and also law enforcement has to be present. So there are some restrictions on this, and I'm curious how this is going to be played out, because again, as we kind of discussed, it's so vague, and your average person isn't necessarily going to understand that on first reading. It makes it sound like, oh, well, if someone feels like it, they can come back to your house and see, what it looks like and take pictures, and we don't want that. But if that stuff starts happening, I can't help but wonder, like, why would judges be making that decision to do that, and are they making those decisions to allow that type of behavior based on what is actually written in the law, or because they're misunderstanding the law or misapplying the law?
Practically speaking, again, let's just use a typical real case scenario here. This is the sort of thing that happens when your house gets broken into. Let's say it's a time, hopefully, when you're not home. They don't come in and politely open up a few things here and there, and oh, look, here's a necklace. Okay, I'll take that. And we'll push that drawer shut. Oh, and over here, here's a big screen TV. We'll gently lift it off the wall, and we'll wrap it in towels and take it out. No, what they do, they ransack your place, meaning they go through it like Sherman through Georgia as fast as possible. Yank out drawers, empty them on the floor, kick through what's on the floor to look for valuables, yank out the next things. They extend their arm and pull an entire shelf of books off onto the floor to see if there's anything that's been concealed up there. They bash holes in the drywall on the wall looking for safes. They rip pictures, paintings, photographs of loved ones and toss them. There's broken glass everywhere. You walk into the place and it's like shin deep in broken glass and all of your personal possessions scattered thickly throughout the premises.
Yeah.
That's what happens. And you're going to be subject to a court order not to touch that?
Yeah, and in that case, like, I can't imagine, like, anyone would want to, like, you're going to clean up your house. You don't want to live in that mess. You don't want to, like, relive the trauma of, like, walking home every day and, oh, yeah, my house is still trashed, and be reminded of what happened. Because it feels very personally violating. So I can't imagine. I don't know how this law is going to be applied, and this is one of those things I want to watch very closely. I would like to think common sense would prevail, right? Like, the police would go in, take photos, and then that evidence that is gathered in the initial investigation is what is supposed to be turned over to the defense, and then the defense can make their case for why their client didn't do it or whatever, right? Like, whatever needs to be done, and that's what should happen, right? Common sense should dictate that that's what's going to happen. Now, that's not always the reality, particularly in New York State, which is why I get why people are skeptical of this, because they see how it could be misapplied or misinterpreted or end very poorly. And again, I wouldn't want to be in that situation where I'm like, what do you mean I have to keep my house the same way? And they're going to be, oh, well, the new discovery law says you have to do that. I'd be so mad. So mad.
You've been violated again.
Yeah, exactly. So I would hope that that's not how this is going to play out. What I think is going to happen again is that it's just a matter of, like, they've gathered their evidence. No reasonable judge would say, like, you have to keep your house this way for 2 weeks so that the accused can figure this out. No, it's just they gather the evidence. They turn over that evidence to, the defense, so the defense can say, no, my person didn't do this, or my person didn't do this in this way, or whatever it is. And then you have your trial, right? And that's what's supposed to happen. But hey, maybe that's not what happens, though. And I want to keep an open mind to people who I understand are scared, and I get that. I don't, but I always get wary of people who let their fears allow for the what am I thinking? Dismantling of our rights too. Because if I'm in that other situation, if someone's accusing me of breaking into someone's house and tearing things up, and I need to build a defense, and I'm like, hey, no, I was somewhere else. I wasn't there at this time, and you wouldn't find my fingerprints in the house, and you wouldn't find me on security tapes. I want to get that information. I want to get the if they have a video camera system, or if I want to see if there's no evidence that I was there. I want to be able to access that. I want to be able to show that they can't prove me guilty. And again, it is guilty unless proven, or it is innocent unless proven guilty. It's not the other way around.
Yeah, unless you're President Trump and being impeaced. But that's another show.
Come on. We'll get that. We'll have impeachment part. We did one. Did we do part two?
Are the 12 days of impeachments over? I think
no, we'll do another one. The trial's going to start soon. We're going to do impeachments again. It's going to be. We'll do that. It's going to start up again soon. All right, so when we come back, I'll talk a little bit more about what the Discovery Reform Law says, other protections for witnesses, and again, what this means for safety in New York State. We're back just a few.
Twice the power. WYSL. More powerful FM 92.1, FM 95.5 West and 1040 AM WYSL Avon Rochester.
Here's the latest forecast from the News 10 NBC Weather Center for tonight. Mostly cloudy skies. We'll have a slight chance of a shower. Temperatures in the 30s. On Wednesday, one more pretty nice day in the 40s with a bit of sunshine. Thursday, a front will come through. Gusty breeze, some snow showers, some minor accumulations in the 30s. Much colder Friday in the teens, and we are looking at some snow or a wintry mix on Saturday. I'm Rich Cornelia, WYSL.
After a 12-year battle against the people, Governor Cuomo and the political elite applauded the signing of the Reproductive Health Act earlier this year. They insisted that New York expand abortion so that women will still have a place to get their abortions if the Supreme Court reverses the 1973 ruling legalizing it. New York is well known to tourists for its cities, mountains, and waterfalls. Now politicians have added late-term abortion to the list. Recently, abortion advocates have lamented that while New York opened the door for late-term abortions, not enough doctors are walking through it. The question that New Yorkers for Constitutional Freedoms asks seems warranted. Why does the political left have such an insatiable appetite for late-term abortion? This Real Abortion News Update is sponsored by Compass Care. For a full transcript, go to realabortionnews.com.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to SimpleTech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that SimpleTech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at SimpleTech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at SimpleTech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. SimpleTech Innovations.
Trends are moving local, from sourcing local farms to shopping small businesses. So why are you still with that big, cold, nationwide bank? St. Pius Federal Credit Union is inviting you back home. And coming home shouldn't mean sacrificing the services you want. St. Pius Credit Union offers state-of-the-art online banking, a mobile app, low fees, competitive rates, with access to dozens of fee-free ATMs. Let us show you how easy coming home can be at spxfcu.org. St. Pius Federal Credit Union.
Fiorella, a family-owned farm-to-table Italian restaurant with casual atmosphere at the newly renovated Rochester Public Market. Fiorella offers wood-fired, old-world-style pizza with naturally leavened dough, house-made fresh pasta, desserts, and gelato. Enjoy craft beers, imported Italian and New York State wines. Open Wednesday through Saturday for lunch and dinner. Wednesday evenings enjoy no corkage fee. And Thursday is gnocchi night. Call 434-5705 for reservations. View the menu on the web. restaurantfiorella.com.
This is Dom Genova, owner of Genesee Valley Motors in Avon, your no-nonsense car dealer. Well, we're your no-nonsense truck dealer, too, selling Rams and Fords up to the mightiest that they make. And we have a shop with Master Techs open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. 6 days a week, even Saturday, so you can get your truck serviced when it's not billing hours for you. You may not be used to that. Visit RochesterWorkTrucks.com. That's RochesterWorkTrucks.com.
Livingston Eye Care. Coming back.
Avon welcomes new patients of all ages. Stop in and see the newly remodeled optical department with new frames for everyone in the family. Make 2020 the year you see clearer. Livingston Eye Care, East Main Street, Avon.
Oops, sorry, got a promo next.
400.
WYSL. This is your home for exciting University of Rochester basketball all season long on WYSL. Friday night, the U of R Yellow Jackets are back on the road to take on the Brandeis University Judges in a UAA showdown. Women's game at 6, the men follow at 8. Then on Sunday, the Yellow Jackets wrap up the road trip in New York City for a big matchup with the NYU Violets. The men's game tips off at 12 noon with the women's contest set for 2 o'clock on your home for the best local college sports coverage in Rochester. WYSL.
You're listening to Radio Free New York.
All right, we're back here on Radio Free New York. I'm Kevin Wilson, in for Andrew Hollister today while he's out for a week on a vacation. We are talking the other aspects of criminal justice reform. We covered bail reform a bit last week. We're talking about the defense discovery reform stuff going on right now. And one of the biggest questions that I've seen about this is, does this defense discovery reform make witnesses more vulnerable? And there is a part of that Marshall Project article that I posted. It says a 2015 New York State Bar Association report concluded that states with more open systems do not have worse problems with witness intimidation than New York. In Brooklyn, Gonzalez says, threats to witnesses occur because the defendants already know who they are. So he's saying that in a lot of cases, the defendants are already aware of the people involved in the case, so it doesn't really matter. So witness intimidation is still going to happen, but it was already happening anyway.
But they're free. They're, they didn't have to post bail, and they're out walking around with a promise to show up in court.
Oh, sure. But they could do that before, right? If someone's able to post the $500, $5,000 bail, whatever the 10% that they need to put up for that, well, in that case, well, they would be out anyway, unless they're too poor to pay the $500 bail.
And that's the thing. In many cases, they're not able to post bail, so that keeps them off the street.
Well, that ain't right either. That's not what bail's supposed to be used for. Come on, Bob. We talked about this last week.
I know, but practically speaking,
yeah, practically
how
speaking,
it's used.
Yeah, no, I know that's how it's used, but it's not supposed to be how it's used. And what we had concluded last week, and I know I'm still getting feedback about this, is that if we want to have a bail system that works the way people think it does, there needs to be an option to remand people who are actually too dangerous to be out on the streets, right? There needs to be some option for that. And I get that. The devil's in the details, as we talked about last week. What does that actually look like? How do you ensure a fair system of justice where someone is held in jail prior to being convicted at trial? Are you able to get a fair... Is that fair to those people, right? So in practice now, yeah, more people are being let out, but in reality is that they were always able to get out if they had money. And you look at cases where there are people who are held in jail for months or years, and I saw a statistic. Rikers Prison is like $900 a day to keep someone down there in jail, and people who aren't able to post a $5,000 bail will stay there for 2 years and be found innocent. That's expensive. It's unjust. That person has lost their job, lost their connections with family, and now they're more likely to actually commit crime because they've been put in a position where they've lost everything because they've been in jail, even if they end up being innocent. And so that's again, there's still a lot of myths going around about the bail thing that continue to frustrate me a little bit because
give us a couple of them.
Well, again, with the bail thing is just that people have always been able to get out. There's an article I had posted the other day, and I'll share it in the stream if I can find it while I'm talking to y'all, where there's a guy who was accused of murdering, I think his parents. He killed them with an axe. Right. And the bail was like $500,000. He was able to put it up. So this guy who
was that the Porco case?
Yeah, it might have been. I can find it now. I'm trying to look at
the Porco. He was a U of R student, and his parents got frustrated with him because he was like a no count kind of guy. So he wanted to transfer, and they said they denied him permission to transfer to another college. Yeah. And they also told him he couldn't go on spring break because he'd been a sluggard, and got bit.
Case.
Yeah, the Porco case.
Yeah,
and he snuck home on Thanksgiving break and took an axe to his mom and dad while they slept.
Yeah. So that guy, he got out on bail, and he came back to his trial and was found guilty. So that guy got out.
50 to life, I think.
Yeah. So, but there are other cases, again, where someone is they're not able to make $500 bail. They, it's on petty larceny or something. They sit in jail for 2 months waiting their trial, aren't even found guilty, and then get out. Now, it's 2 months that they spent in jail when they weren't convicted of a crime. And I'm just making up these numbers, but that's roughly how it ends up looking in some of these cases. And I know that some of the people who are accused of crimes are really bad, and we don't want them out on the street. I get it. I heard some of my coworkers talking about like a domestic violence case that happened to a friend of theirs. Is that someone was arrested on domestic violence, was able to get out without posting bail.
Well, that's the category of cases that are extremely they're egregious.
Yeah, and I get why people would be upset with this, but again, had that person been able to post bail, they would have gotten out anyway. That's what would have happened before. It's like, okay, you get a domestic violence case. There should be, in some of these cases, and often judges have the option for protective orders to say, okay, you've had this accusation. There's going to be a protective order. You can't go within so many feet of this person. You can't go to their place.
Yeah, many of those orders are jokes too.
Right. But I mean, but before there's a trial, before there's a conviction, before you are proven guilty beyond the shadow of a doubt, what does it make sense for our system to punish people prior to that, right? And again, but before you're able to prove guilt versus innocence. And I think that's a tough thing for people to wrap their head around. I mean, the idea is scary, right? Like the idea of living in a free society where you have rights and where you aren't able to be punished without due process is frightening to some people. But again, we've lived in the system for a while, and I don't think that the bail system works the way that people thought it worked. I think a lot of people assumed like, when you get accused of a serious crime, you're just spending months in jail. That's not really how it works. It only works that way if you don't have money to post bail. You could commit a serious crime or be accused of committing a serious crime, post that $250,000 bail like Porco, and then be out the next day. Or Harvey Weinstein, he was able to post his $2 million bail, some ridiculous number. He got out. It's fine. He committed. He was accused of committing several crimes. He's out within an hour because he has money to do that. But if you don't have money, and if you are wrongly accused of something, why should you sit in jail for months at a time just because you're not able to put up that money? And that's why there's need for reform. And I get, again, why we would want a system, and I think New Jersey has something like this, and I need to do more research on that, why you'd want a system to keep dangerous people in custody in certain circumstances. But I think those circumstances have to be really extreme, and you don't want the guy who stole a candy bar to be held because some judge just says, that guy looks dangerous. We don't want those types of situations, right?
Well, I don't think that would ever happen. I know you're posing a hypothetical, but literally stealing a candy bar and now a judge thinks you're dangerous. Yeah. That's not going to happen.
Well, I'm being a bit hyperbolic, right?
I understand.
I am
exaggerating for effect.
Yeah, but that's the point, right? Is again, we don't know. If you don't know if this person is actually guilty, you haven't seen all the evidence yet. Again, I don't think it's right to keep someone in jail. I think you're depriving someone of due process. I think that's violating the 5th, 6th, and 8th Amendments there. And again, in a society that I want to live in, we kind of err on the side of individuals ought to be free until they go through a due process that says otherwise, that proves that they are guilty beyond the shadow of a doubt, that they need to be incarcerated for the safety of the public or to make recompense in some way, right? So that's again, the society I want to live. I would prefer overall to jail people less, both because it's expensive and it's unproductive in a lot of cases. Because my overall conception of justice is we should try to focus more on restorative justice and try to get people to.
Does that work though? What's the track record been for restorative justice?
I want to do a whole show on this one because I think it's important to get it right and to make sure I have all the articles in front of me because I mostly prepared for Discovery.
But just in general terms.
But in general terms, I think that's the way a free society ought to work, right? Like if you steal something from someone, it's better to have that person make up for it either monetarily or in some other way than to have that person sit in jail and cost me more money through my taxes to sit in jail for 2 years.
Oh, that's why we did away with debtor's prison 150 years ago. He's never going to pay anybody back as long as he's in the clink.
Yeah. I mean, but like, in fact, that's what we end up kind of doing though, right? It's just, again, someone steals something or someone commits some other crime, instead of giving an option to be able to make up for it in some way, a lot of times it becomes a crime against the state, right? It's what they used to call it, the disturbing the king's peace, right? Like that's where the concept comes from way back when. You know, you're not committing a crime against a person, you're committing a crime against the state. And I think that conception, although I understand where it came from and what the need for that was, I think it misses the opportunity to actually make people whole as best as possible, and it costs us a lot of money. So we'll finish wrapping up discovery reform stuff in our last segment. Thanks again for listening to Radio Free New York.
Why do businesses choose to move their website from Wix and Squarespace to SimpleTech Innovations? Maybe it's their excellent customer service or attention to detail. Maybe it's their ability to give a truly customized solution. Or perhaps they just like the fact that SimpleTech is a local small business that builds great relationships with its clients. Whatever the reason may be, you can rest assured knowing that the local team at SimpleTech has your best interest in mind when building or updating your website. They're hands-on and love helping customers achieve their goals. But don't take my word for it. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. If your website doesn't match your dreams or isn't achieving your goals, give the professionals at SimpleTech Innovations a call today for a consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. SimpleTech Innovations.
Aircraft Environmental Systems proudly supports Radio Free New York. Rochester-based leaders in climate simulation chambers for America's R&D laboratories. We're experts in troubleshooting, calibrations, custom designs, and consulting for more than 40 years. Industry pioneers, we created the first ever fleet of temperature, humidity, and altitude test chambers available to rent coast to coast. Trained and trusted by environmental chamber manufacturers, we are ACES. Find us at acesinc.com.
Human trafficking is when someone is being forced, tricked, or coerced to engage in a sex trade or forced labor. If you're a kid and forced to sell sex, drugs, or work against your will, that's trafficking. You're not a criminal, and there is help available. Call the National Human Trafficking Hotline at 888-373-7888 or text Be Free. Sponsored by the Livingston County Safe Harbors Human Trafficking Task Force.
Last spot
is on computers and technology to operate. Slow, unreliable networks and servers can cause unplanned downtime and affect your bottom line. The experts at SimpleTech Innovations are here to help. Their preventative maintenance program ensures that your computers and network are kept up to date and monitored for any issues, keeping your business running smoothly. They also help clients achieve HIPAA, PCI, and New York State cybersecurity compliance to keep your network safe and secure. Whatever your business IT needs are, SimpleTech Innovations should be your first call. They've won the best in Rochester 8 years in a row and have an A+ Better Business Bureau rating. Call them today for a free consultation at 585-200-3182. That's 585-200-3182. SimpleTech Innovations.
Radio Free New York.
Andrew is away on a family gathering, and we have Kevin Wilson in studio today.
All right, welcome back to Radio Free New York. Thanks for listening today, guys, and thank you for the thoughtful comments. And I'm going to get to those in just a moment. So I got two in, one from Rick DeLorme. So, Rick, thanks for your question. He asked about the Taekwon Rivera case. He had mentioned, how about the guy who shot Anthony DePonzio and has now moved on to dealing heroin laced with fentanyl? And as Rick pointed out, he was released with an ankle bracelet and was shot and again was in jail for shooting the police officer. Anthony
he got 10 years when he was 14 years old.
And so
he just got out.
And he got out, was accused of dealing fentanyl, was out again, and he's out with an ankle bracelet right now. So judges do have some options to monitor people in some cases. They can choose options where they think someone might be a flight risk or a danger to the community, and they don't have a bail option. Small-time drug dealing usually isn't – a lot of people get out on bail anyway. That's kind of always been the case. I know this guy is unique in that he has been accused of or is found guilty of a very serious crime. But again, in most of these drug dealing cases – people are getting out on bail anyway. That's just kind of how it goes. And Rick, I encourage you to listen to our show last week. We went into a lot more detail with the Taekwon Rivera case, but I think for the most part, he's being monitored. He's going to go to trial. He served his time for that previous thing. I don't think that it makes sense to like hold this guy in jail because he was accused of dealing fentanyl.
How about holding him in jail because he's a predicate felon, a repeat offender? I mean, within weeks of getting out of the joint, 10 years, that's more than that's your half your life.
Yeah, no, he
at his
went in
age.
there 14 to 24. And, I think that says more about like, how do we make sure, and I don't exactly feel bad for this guy, but also like, how do we make sure people don't get out and reoffend, right? Like the recidivism rate in New York State is very high. How do we make sure when you get out of jail, you're going to be able to go and get a job and be productive? There's always going to be some people who are going to be like, nope, I love crime, I want to keep doing crime. But some people, it ends up being a desperation thing. So how do you get them out of that life? And so I think in this case, it's
economic opportunity would be nice.
Exactly.
There's jobs
and that's what it
people.
is.
People can find something to do.
Yeah, exactly. If there's economic opportunity,
support themselves, they have something
to get them to get a job.
Some way to support themselves other than dealing drugs.
Yeah, but I mean, in this case, I think it makes sense. I think electronic monitoring is fine. He was accused of another crime. He will get his trial. He will serve his time for whatever that is. I think that's appropriate in this case. And Emmy had asked a question on Facebook. You can be caught red-handed even in armed robbery or home invasion, still no type of bail. I don't think armed robbery falls under bail reform, but certain types of home invasion do. And again, bail's a matter of like. The bail reform makes it so that the least restrictive form of getting someone back to court is what is used instead, right? So in certain types of home break-in situations, they might not be able to set bail, but if the conditions are right, they can set other types of restrictions on their movement. Maybe they're not allowed to leave the state, electronic monitoring in some cases. So there are options to try to make sure that they are less of a danger to the public, and that they aren't able to, that they're going to come back to court. That's kind of the point. And again, we don't know in some of these cases, as we had talked about in the last segment, if someone's actually guilty or not. And, it doesn't strike me as something a free society should do to keep someone locked up prior to trial when you haven't proven their guilt. I don't think that should be the normal condition. I think it should only be under extraordinary circumstances where that type of thing happens. Now, before we run out of time, I do want to read one more segment because I mentioned in the title I wanted to talk about whether or not witnesses were less safe. So there's another section I want to read about that. And that there are procedures for limiting disclosure of witness information, right? So it's not like New York State didn't think about this when they were writing this law. And it says, when the prosecution and defense does not wish to disclose specific material or evidence, they may establish good cause for the non-disclosure, notify the opposing party in writing that information is being withheld, and provide for a protective order. So there is a procedure in place where that's able to happen. And there's a hearing requirement. So, both parties can go and kind of make their case for why information should or shouldn't be withheld and whether or not there's a good reason to do so. There has to be good cause. It says when establishing the need for a protective order, the party moving for it must show that there's good cause exception. Good cause can arise under specific circumstances, mostly relating the safety of and risk to a witness and the preservation of a defendant's constitutional rights. When good cause is established, the time periods for turning over discovery can be modified. And then there's also a review process, an appellate review process. So it can go to an appellate court if they think they've arrived at the wrong decision. And then there's also sanctions. So any party that violates a protective order by sharing protected information can be charged with criminal contempt. So that does address some of the I think, legitimate concerns. Like if you have to disclose this witness information early and you're a witness in the case and you're worried like, hey, is this person going to come back and get me because my name is out? Prosecutors can make the case like, oh, we don't want this person's name and information disclosed because it will be a risk to them. But I think, again, that's one of those things. If you're going to use that evidence in a crime, there has to be a very good reason for that, right? Because this is the person's life who's on the line. The defendant's life is on the line. I think they have a right to defend themselves and know who their accusers are. And so you have to have a very good reason to not do that, because the state is making the case that person should be captured and held in a cage for possibly years at a time. So it's very serious. And you want that process to be open and transparent as possible, except in extreme circumstances. Got thoughts on that?
Do I have thoughts on it?
Yeah.
No, I think that's succinct.
Yeah, so that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does.
Yeah, because again, that's one I've seen a lot of. In when I first read that, Andrew and I had discussed this too when we were talking about doing this show. Is like, hey, maybe this is something that is really bad. Maybe this is a serious flaw in this bill that we have seen. But as I started digging into this more and doing more research, I'm like, oh, this is another one of those things where people are kind of misunderstanding a very complicated process and misapplying it to that situation. But again, that's what we talked about earlier with all this other stuff is.
Well, it's a complex process, but the 30,000-foot view here is, you already observed quite accurately that New York has a real problem with recidivism. Yeah. And so I think that the general population sees that. I think that's a widely known, people widely possess that impression. And then they see legislation that's basically emptying out the jails and prisons in the state, and they feel like that's a threat to public safety.
Yeah,
kind of hard to reconcile the two, I think.
Right, and again, I think that I haven't seen anything that I really dislike about the criminal justice reform package that happened. I mostly, and I know this is an unpopular opinion among people in the comment section right now, but I mostly like what I've seen in the criminal justice. But I still recognize that there is that element of legitimate concern for safety. If there is recidivism, if people are getting out of prisons after 10 years and going out and committing more crimes, or there's issues with witness safety, like that's something we do need to address. Like I think people do have a legitimate need to feel safe, but you have to balance it out with how do we make sure that we live in a free society that protects the rights of the accused, the rights of individuals? Again, what the government does when it sends someone to jail is it's taking you, it's capturing you, and it's putting you in a cage.
No, everybody understands that. I think the problem is that we have an extremely complex set of circumstances going on here that contribute to the proliferation of crime, and I think that the economy is a major contributor to that. And when you have a confiscatory regime in Albany that makes it's very difficult to do business in New York, that limits opportunity and it limits employment. And they have the Cuomo administration in particular is notorious for having this totally cavalier attitude towards protecting business and business interests. They're completely hostile towards business in most objective analyses. And when you do that, what you're doing is depriving the population of a means by which they can support themselves.
Yeah.
Well, I understand that supports the interests of big government and of control freaks like Andrew Cuomo and his ilk. Michael Bloomberg, I'll throw him in the mix as well. But what you wind up with is the morass that we have.
Yeah, no, it creates desperate people, right? If there's no opportunity, there's more likely to be poverty. There's more likely to be crime. And again, you're never going to eliminate crime entirely, but if you have an economy that's thriving, you're going to be more likely to have a peaceful society as well.
And not only that, we also have a public education system that in most cases, not all, but in most cases is inculcating a sense of victimhood.
Yeah. No, that's true. But so I do want to hit one more point because I know we got a minute left, and that's
less.
Yeah, less. All right, so a lot of libertarians say they're in favor of criminal justice reform, and guys, I'm with you, obviously, but we ended at the war on drugs. And I'm for limiting the war on drugs, but that's not the entire issue with the criminal justice system. This is the hard stuff. This is the hard stuff that we really need to look into and see what makes sense. If we want fewer people in jail, if we want a smaller government, if we want greater protections of our individual liberties, this is the hard stuff that we need to tackle too, the stuff that scares people. That's all we have for Radio Free New York today. I'm Kevin Wilson, subbing in for Andrew Hollister. Thanks again for joining me. We will be back tomorrow.
You're going to be back? There's going to be more fun with Kevin?
More fun with Kevin. Yeah.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. Seriously. See you next time on Radio Free New York.
Sometimes doing things that are hard